So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Welcome to this Froebel Trust webinar. My name is Sasha Powell. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Froebel Trust. We're delighted to have with us today speakers who are going to share their knowledge, experience and expertise about the Froebel short courses. Our speakers are Dr. Stella Louis, who is the leader of the Froebel short courses. And we also have with us Amber Bosson, who we're very pleased to welcome from Guildford Nursery School. Amber has been involved in training on the short courses, and we'd love to hear about her experience of that. We've also got the privilege of having Professor Tina Bruce joining us today. I'm sure Tina needs no introduction, but in the unlikely event that you haven't come across Tina or her work already, I would like to say that we are very pleased to have a world-leading Froebelian educator and scholar with us in Tina, who also co-created the Froebel short courses. So thank you also to Tina for joining us. We are hoping that Carol Bromley, who is the owner, owner and manager of the Puddle Nursery in London, will be joining us too, so that she too can share her experience of the Froebel short courses with you. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube. So your microphones and your cameras have been muted and switched off automatically. That means that if you'd like to ask a question of anyone on the panel, please could you use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. If you hover your mouse near the bottom of your screen, you should see Q&A. If you click on that, you'll be able to type in your questions and I will monitor the Q&A, and towards the end of the webinar, there'll be time for the panelists to respond to your questions and comments and feedback as well. There will be a poll, which you may already have seen, which should pop up. And we'd be really delighted if you wouldn't mind answering just the handful of questions that there are in that poll. Basically, we're interested to know why you're interested in today's webinar and indeed the Froebel short courses, and why now, and where you're coming from. So I'm going to hand over, without further ado, to Stella, who will begin the presentation, which will altogether will be about 40 to 45 minutes, including our other colleagues speaking too, and then there'll be some time for discussion at the end. Thank you very much, Stella.
Okay, all right, thank you, Sasha. Welcome to Carol, and good morning. Good morning, everybody. I am Stella Louis, and I'm the lead trainer for the Froebel short courses. I want to start the session by just giving you a little bit of information about Frederick Froebel. Could I have the first slide, please, Victoria? You know, who was Frederick Froebel? Frederick Froebel was a German educator, and he was born on the 21st of April, 1782, so a really long time ago. In 1837, Froebel invented the kindergarten, and kindergarten translates to garden for children. For Froebel, the kindergarten was a place where children learn through their own efforts. And it was this learning that Froebel believed led children to thinking, reasoning, and understanding. Froebel highlighted the importance of the different developmental stages that children go through, and he recognized that each stage of development was dependent on what has gone before. And for Froebel, each stage needs to be lived fully and thoroughly and not to be rushed. And I think that's quite relevant for us today. Froebel is quite famous for developing gifts and occupations. And if you can see behind me, I have the gifts behind me. If I show you gift one, which is a set of six balls, and they're soft. And if you look at gift two, I'm going to just point to gift two. I hope you can see them. If you look at gift two, you can see you've got the same sphere, but now you've got a cylinder and you've got a cube. But Froebel was highly intelligent, because there's a relationship between gift 1 and gift 2. Gift 1 is soft, gift 2 is solid and hard. And if you look at the spear, it goes round, but it can also connect to the cylinder on this side because this rolls. Whereas the cylinder connects to the cube if you pull it this way because they're both flat. So one of the themes for Froebel was the law of opposites, and in all the worthwhile resources and materials that he developed, he made sure they were whole in the sense that you had both. You had the law of opposites, so children could do lots of discovering. The occupations were things like stick laying, sewing, weaving, cooking from simple recipes, clay, pinballs, pegboards, slate and chalk, sand and water. The occupations were really, really important. I think also for Froebel, his interest in play and learning, and his interest was in play, learning and the natural world. This idea of engagement with nature, not just about going outside and playing, but real engagement with nature was really, really important to Froebel. And I think also because he spent quite a lot of his childhood in the garden of his family home, that nature became of great importance. Froebel developed mother songs, and they're called mother songs because back in the 1800s, women weren't teachers. It was men. Women stayed at home to kind of rear their children. But Froebel recognized that mothers in particular could play a real crucial role in just developing their children's abilities. I just want to step back a little bit. And one of the things I want to say about his importance with nature and the outdoors is that he saw the indoor environment as being an environment that was structured, and that the educators would dictate the kind of learning that would take place, hence the gifts and the occupations. Whereas the outdoor environment, Froebel believed that needed to be kind of unstructured so that children could really kind of become curious and explore. So if we go back to the mother songs, I want this to be as interactive as possible. I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you, and I do want you to write your answers in the chat room. You know, thinking about the mother songs, what rhymes and songs do you sing with children in your setting? Or if you're a childminder, what rhymes and songs do you sing with children at home? And once you've recorded what rhymes and songs you sing with children, I guess what I want to say is, what do you look for when you're choosing songs and rhymes? Because, you know, up until I came across Frederick Froebel, I would just sing the songs with the children that they knew. I didn't really think about progression. However, with Froebel's mother songs, you will see that there is a huge progression. He goes from lullabies to the whole hand. Then he goes to part, the finger. Then he'll look at the midline, crossing the midline. Then he'd look at children on the spot sitting down, upper body movement. Then on the spot, whole body movement. There is this wonderful book, Songs, Rhymes and Finger Plays, which is a pamphlet that's produced by the Froebel Trust. And those of you that haven't seen this, I really recommend that you kind of download it, because it gives you a lot of insight into Froebel's work around the mother songs. And I think his mother songs work is a huge and important contribution. You know, we need to think about songs that provoke emotional exchange, songs that offer anticipation or thrill, songs that support the development and the physical coordination of children, songs that help children to develop symbolic representation, awareness of symbols, because all of these things are forerunners for, you know, learning to read and learning to write. We need to think about songs that make the connection between rhyme, rhythm and movement. So I think where it comes to sort of mother songs and finger rhymes, there's a huge amount of work that Froebel did. Can I have the next slide, please? Principle 7. This is a principle that's been articulated by Professor Tina Bruce, and it says, what children can do rather than what they cannot do is the starting point for children's education. And you know, that becomes really, really important. And one of the things that the short Froebel courses really help us to do is to think about how we're starting with what children know and with what they can do. Next slide, please. And I will be returning to that principle later on when I begin to make links with Froebelian philosophy and the current EYFS in England. But first, I just want to kind of read this quote to you. Froebel lists 3 different types of play. He differentiates between symbolic play consisting of representations of ordinary life, creative play where the materials used is the only limiting factor, and imitative play which freely recreates what has been learned at school. He adds that play presupposes an active and purposeful life in and out of school. Such a life will produce play, which in turn will enhance life. And this is the first indication of Froebel's expansive theory that the structure of play needs to be understood if adults are going to use it for educational purposes. So what I really want to talk about now is the network of learning and what those 3 different types of play actually mean in reality. You know, Froebel talks a lot about the importance of children's first-hand experiences. You know, it's really important that we offer children real things first. So for instance, if we're doing stuff around a farm, rather than give a child a purple cow, it's really important for the child to meet a real cow. And once they've met the real cow, then the purple cow can come in, because then the child has something real. So first-hand experiences are really important for Froebel. And I alluded earlier on that Froebel talked a lot about development, that whatever stage it is our children are at, we need to be that stage. And he recognized that struggle was really important to learning. You know, struggle, discovering, practicing newly acquired skills, and repetition. And what's important for Froebel is that educators, parents support children through those sequences without rushing them through. And I guess that's how children develop competence, control, and mastery. I want to kind of move on now to wallowing. Wallowing is a term that's been used by Tina Bruce, but it really does relate to Froebelian practice. Froebel and Tina both talk about children wallowing in feelings, ideas, and relationships. And quite often we observe children. We observe them in their play, but we may not always be able to recognize what their ideas are, or whether they're kind of representing feelings, or it might have something to do with the relationship. And I think for Froebel was really concerned about the inner life of the child and the outer expressive activities and how the child makes the inner outer. And I know if you're hearing this for the first time, it might kind of sound like, oh my God, what has she said? But the easiest way I can explain this is to give you this example. A few years ago, I was in South Africa and I observed a little girl in a nursery playing on her own. And over a period of a week, this little girl played completely on her own. She had sticks that she seemed to be lining up and arranging. And on the last day, I saw her lie across a piece of fabric. And I remember thinking to myself, this little one's sunbathing. And having a discussion with her teacher, and it transpired that her mum had died in a car crash a couple of months previously, and her father would spend much of his time at the cemetery laying flowers. And I think the play that we were observing was this little girl making sense of her feelings, her ideas, and her relationship. And it was really important that her expressive play made her inner feelings outer. So when we talk about feelings, ideas and relationships, it's about how children make what's inside visible for us to see. And it's really important that we give children opportunities to kind of wallow in their play. I think something else that becomes really important under this wonderful Froebelian network of learning is children's games, you know, rules of games. Children don't just need us to teach them rules. Games help children understand that rules are made by somebody else. And sometimes rules can be made by them themselves. Games help children to take part and also fit into a culture. Through games, children learn how to keep rules, how to change them, and in ways that are acceptable to others. Many years ago, I worked in a nursery school and there was this little girl called Tracy. And if Tracy was in the home corner, whatever she told you were, because her rules were the only rules that mattered. They were the only rules that children would obey. So again, you can see how play becomes really important. And I think games give children a sense of belonging. It helps them to feel part of a community. And also, it lets them know a little bit about their culture and their community. Representations, symbolic representations are really, really important. And when children make something, it's like, it's their way of kind of keeping their experience alive. And I think what becomes really important is children need to be able to make representations that are based on their experiences and not ours. You know, Tina Bruce says it's pointless asking a child to sort of draw a bee if they've never examined one closely. But actually, if they've examined an ant closely, then it would be an ant that would be their starting point. And I think the last point I want to make on the Network for Learning is talking about storying. We've got this huge push on communication, but actually children are storying all the time. Children are desperate to tell you about things that matter to them, about their family, about where they've been. And an example again that I would share, it links back to Cape Town. I was returning from Cape Town on my own, and it was a night flight. It's an 11-hour night flight, and I just wanted to sleep. And as I approach my seat, I see a 4-year-old wedged between me and the window. And I remember thinking, oh no. She was the most delightful 4-year-old I had the pleasure to meet, because she told me all about her family, what they were doing in South Africa, what she was going to watch on the TV. You know, children are storying all the time, but much is dependent upon us as adults about how interested we are in what it is they have to say to us. So to kind of sum up the Network for Learning, you know, what I would say is, for Froebel, play coordinates and integrates all children's efforts and all learning. It brings together different types of learning into the network. It helps children to understand and make sense of what they've been learning in relation to their feelings, their ideas and relationships. And it also helps children to realise what they know, and it helps them to make connections. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I've done here is I've kind of used the English EYFS just to kind of show how Froebel really does link to current practice today. So on the left, or on my left, we've got playing with what they know, pretending objects are things from their experiences, representing their experiences in their play, taking on a role in their play. And on my right, we've got the Froebelian approach to playing with what they know. And again, I'll link back to that principle, you know, start where the learner is, not where you want them to be, because that becomes critically important. Again, you've got things like symbolic representation. Children do over and over again. You've got pretend play 1, you've got pretend play 2. Pretend play 1 is literal. So if I'm playing a game about tea party, I've got to have something that looks like a real cup for me to play. Whereas pretend play 2 is much more symbolic. I might be playing tea parties, but I could use this to pretend it's my cup. Then you have play like Fantasy F. And fantasy F is really important because it could be, you know, this is how children, they'll play games of being mummy, being daddy, rehearsing roles, or that they may or may not do later on. And then you have fantasy PH. And fantasy PH are about things children can never, ever, ever be. You know, being a dinosaur, being a dog, being a cat, being a rat. Those things they can't be, hence being PH. Then you have imitation. And imitation isn't mere copying. And then you have familiar rhymes. And again, with familiar rhymes, you get this sense of symbolic representation. Because even if I was to do something like round and round the garden, I am being fairly symbolic. And also a sense of community. So all of these things are kind of unpicked and explored in one of the elements. And that element is the symbolic life of the child. Next slide, please. And again, you can see on the right, I've used more Froebelian language. We have language of creativity. And remember, Froebel says the only limiting factor is the materials that we use. We have freedom with guidance. And, you know, I said at the start that, you know, you really believe that children learn through their own efforts. So they need to be offered a level of freedom. They need to be allowed to struggle, to manipulate, to practice, but equally children need guidance. And childhood needs to be respected. Their developmental stages need to be respected, and there will be connectiveness in that. And the gifts and occupation are, again, sort of worthwhile educational experiences. Next slide, please. Okay, and on this final slide, again, if I just focus on the Froebelian way of doing things, it's about making sure that link always links. And I think with even just looking at link always links, it brings us back to this idea of the law of opposites, the fullness, the thoroughness of things that we are providing to children. And I kind of feel like I've rushed through that a bit, but that's deliberate, because I want you to kind of buy into the course. So that was very much a taster of element 4, the symbolic life of the child. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so who are the courses for? The courses, as Sasha alluded to earlier on, were developed by Professor Tina Bruce in response to what teachers, practitioners and childminders had said to her about what they wanted. This course is designed for anybody that's working with children, that's wanting to develop their pedagogy, develop their practice, and work on a set of principles that absolutely support the right of children. Next slide, please. Okay, how are the courses structured? What I will say is there are 6 elements, and each element is made up of 2 days. Element 1 is mandatory. You have to attend element 1. And element 1 is about the principles and practice of Froebelian practice. Each element is 2 days, and day 1 will take place 4 to 6 weeks after day 2 will take place 4 to 6 weeks after day 1. Each course is delivered by 2 trained, endorsed Froebelian traveling tutors, and each of the elements, at the end of day 1, there is a little kind of assignment, a practical assignment that you do, and then you revisit that assignment again on day 2. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are the elements. Element 1 is absolutely compulsory, and it's an introduction to principles and practice of the Froebelian approach to early childhood education, and that's the mandatory. Element 2 is looking at gifts and occupations and really fully exploring those. What I actually forgot to say is with every single element, we give you handouts, we give you paperwork, we loan you gifts and occupations. So you have these things within your setting from day 1 right through till day 2. So you'll have these resources for about 6 weeks where you can explore them. So element 2 is the gifts and occupations. Element 3 is the importance of engaging with nature and outdoor learning. Element 4, the symbolic life of the child, and you had a little taste of that today. Element 5 is lullabies, family songs, finger songs, action songs, movement games. And element 5 is, I think Froebel also said this, his most important work. Element 5 gives you a really wonderful overview. It really does look at development. It looks at development, it looks at symbolic representation, and it also comes with a moral framework. These things are hugely important. And element 6 has been a more recent development, I guess, in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's about equality and diversity through a Froebelian lens. And we can look at equality and diversity through a Froebelian lens because Froebel talks a lot about individuality, diversity, unity, and connectiveness. So yes, those are the 6 elements. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, I used to have to take a really deep breath when I got to this slide, and I'll tell you why. Each element currently costs £1,600. However, this represents a 50% reduction. And because it's 180 years since Froebel opened the kindergarten, the Froebel Trust has, is subsidizing all of the elements by 50%. And, you know, not only do I want to say thank you to the Trust, I just kind of think that, it's important for me to say that it's currently, 1,600, and it was 3,200. And this is all-inclusive pricing over 2 days for up to 25 staff, co-delivered by 2 endorsed travelling tutors. There's handouts, there's loan of the Froebelian materials. And actually it represents a cost of £32 for 2 days training. And that works out to £16 a day. For two endorsed tutors, I think that really does represent really good value for money. And if you haven't got as many as 25 staff, you could join up with another setting to kind of keep your costs down. Yes. If you want to find out any more information, please visit the Froebel Trust website. I mean, if you want to book, if you want to have further conversations with me on a one-to-one or Victoria, please email Victoria at the Froebel Trust. Can I go over to you now, Sasha?
You certainly can, Stella. Sorry, I am just switching back onto video. Thank you so much, Stella, for that whistle-stop tour, but nevertheless, very illustrative and illuminating tour of the Froebel short courses. Wonderful. It was so good to hear about how Froebelian approaches help children to keep their experiences alive. I love that phrase that you used. And the importance of children being enabled to be storying all the time. And thank you too for explaining and illustrating how play coordinates and integrates learning. I think that was fascinating, and hopefully people want to find out more about that. We've had lots going on in the chat room, lots going on in the Q&A as well, but before we sort of hand over to the Q&A part of the session, I wondered whether Carol or Amber or Tina would like to come in at this point and say anything. Who would like to go first? Anyone?
I would just like to say that as a leader and a manager of a setting, we have undertaken the first element of training about 3 years ago, and it was extremely valuable 2 days spent with my team and 2 wonderful tutors who came to spend time with us. It really helps to clarify a lot of the purpose of those practitioners' roles, and to help them to understand where children are and what their starting points are, and how we can then start to move forwards with those children as individuals as well as within a group setting.
Thank you very much, Carol. I think we've perhaps lost Carol's internet connection temporarily. Oh, she's back.
I'm still here.
Good.
I'd also like to say that since then, my staff team has changed quite a bit. So I'm now in the position where I have members of staff who are quite new to all of this, these ideas of Froebel. So we are looking to actually start all over again, which won't be a bad thing either for those people who already know something about it, but it will help to support the ongoing development of the team, and to be able to promote the Froebelian principles within our everyday practice.
Super, thank you. Amber, would you like to come in at this point and share your experience?
Yeah, so we're halfway through some of the short courses now. I mean, we've done some and we've still got some to go at our nursery.
Amber, can I, sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
I think you maybe need to just speak up a little bit because you're quite quiet if possible.
Okay, let me just check the microphone. Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Perfect, I'll just get a bit closer. We're halfway through, so we've done some of them and we're now starting the rest. We are waiting, obviously we normally do one a year during inset days. We've had Stella who's come along and she's seen some of the practice we've put into place and some of the practice that is ongoing. Obviously during COVID, we've also read all the pamphlets that are out at the moment as well. And there's more ideas that we've already got and are setting up for September. So I think they're great. And I think, you know, they've really helped my practice as an individual. And Stella's seen some of the work I've already put into place at my nursery. And we're currently working on the gifts as well. So it's been really, really informative. And Stella's always there to give us a good helping hand when we need it.
Super. Thank you so much, Amber. And I hope you won't mind my saying that your head teacher shared with us the most wonderful observation that you'd written following your short courses training. And we would love to be able to share that more widely at some point, showing such a deep understanding of children's learning. Tina, would you like to come in at this point and say anything? You're muted, Tina.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
yeah,
we can.
Lovely. It's all this technology, isn't it? I'm on such a steep learning curve.
I think we all are.
Well, it's just wonderful to see the work that you're all doing. And one of the things that I think is being responded to in these courses with this wonderful team of travelling tutors, I mean, they really are a marvellous group of people, is the fact that people don't have to write lots of essays and assignments to accompany this. And I'm so interested to hear that someone like Amber, in writing up the things that are important when you're actually working in the field, that's how the work comes into being articulated. And it's all so practical because you're doing the practical work and you've got a shape and a framework to what you're doing so that you're more confident about the way that you're working with the children and the families. But it's also coming into the way you write things up as another aspect of the work that you're doing with children and families. And I think that's very important for very, very busy practitioners. I mean, there have been times in people's lives, I mean, I know, for example, Carol, you've thoroughly enjoyed doing the Froebel course with the MA, where you're doing essays and dissertations and things. But there's also a huge place for doing courses like this one, which are highly practical, and which actually do help you to be more articulate and to get things down on paper in the work that you do. So congratulations everybody. It sounds as if it's all going forward in the most exciting ways.
Thank you so much, Tina. The Froebel Trust does have a YouTube channel, and if you wanted to learn about the experience of another well, actually, it's a small group of settings in London which have undertaken the majority of the short courses. There is a presentation by Holly Williams from Linden Tree Nursery Group, which you can view on our YouTube channel, and we will send a link to this webinar out to everybody who's taking part today, and you will then find any other videos that the Froebel Trust has posted on the YouTube channel, including Holly Williams' presentation about the impact that the short courses have had in her setting for her and her colleagues. We've had quite a lot, well, as I say, loads going on in the chat, loads going on in the Q&A, and I've been trying to monitor both and to find some themes among the comments and questions. There's been a lot in response to your question, Stella, about songs and rhymes, and I'd like to come back to those in a moment, but if I may first just respond to some of the more practical questions that have been asked. So one was about whether the slides will be available, and as I say, that the whole recording of this webinar will be available on YouTube, and we will talk about whether the slides on their own will be sent separately. I think clearly they can be a very practical resource for encouraging discussion among a team, but perhaps they're not quite so rich without the explanations that Stella has been able to provide us with during today's webinar. We've also had questions about geography, whether the short courses can be offered in settings in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and linked to the Scottish question is whether the short courses are relevant to the curriculum for excellence. Would you like to just respond to that, Stella, first of all?
We have delivered courses in Scotland, so yes, it is relevant to Scotland, and we would look at the Scottish documentation just to kind of make it more holistic and make connections. So I guess on one hand, we're prepared to kind of go wherever there is a request. In relation to does it link to the curriculum for excellence, I would say yes. I would say yes, 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 and yes, yes.
Well, of course, we have had a super presentation that Katrina Gill gave about the Froebelian influences within realising the ambition in Scotland, which again is available on our website if you'd like to have a look at that. It's actually called the Fourth Froebel Network Gathering, in which Katrina Gill presents some slides and commentary about the new curriculum guidance for Scotland. So that may be of interest to colleagues who are based in Scotland. And of course, there is a very vibrant Froebelian community across Scotland as a whole. But yes, Northern Ireland, Wales, England, and indeed other parts of the world have taken part in these courses, and Stella mentioned South Africa and the work that she and Tina and other colleagues have done there in the past. So truly international.
Australia, Perth.
Absolutely,
Yes, yes.
And Calcutta.
Calcutta too, yes. Another very practical question. One colleague asked about whether the short courses are available online, and I was explaining that these take place face-to-face, but that we are exploring blended learning opportunities. But of course, someone quite rightly pointed out that with COVID-19, it can be quite challenging to arrange for the courses to happen face-to-face, and the future is somewhat unpredictable at the moment. But Stella, do you want to say anything about how we're trying to manage the COVID-19 situation and the ongoing offering of the short courses?
Yes, it's difficult. We did initially try and offer this via Zoom, the settings didn't want that. And I guess this was settings that had element 1, and it had been really practical and impactful. They wanted something, they wanted the same kind of, they wanted something very similar to happen for subsequent elements. So although, as you said, Sasha, we are kind of looking at ways of blending the learning, and I think I'm looking more to people like Jane Winnett and Lynn McNear, who are having to do this for the Edinburgh course. I mean, ideally, this is a face-to-face course. It's a practical course. It's not a Zoom course. It may have to become a Zoom course in some way, but for now, we're kind of hopeful that we're going to be taking bookings for sort of October, November, and beyond.
Thank you very much, Stella. Another practical question, which is after element 1, can the elements be booked out of sequence?
Absolutely.
Okay, yes. Good, nice short answer. Thank you so much, Stella. If I may, there's been a lot of commentary and also a couple of questions about mother songs. One comment from Laura House was in response to the question that you asked, Stella, about the appropriateness of songs that are used in settings with young children today, which for me raises the question of what does appropriate mean and who decides what's appropriate. But she quite rightly says that some songs are violent, outdated, racist, and we would want to be cautious about the kinds of songs that are in the repertoire within settings. Excuse me. And so this links to a question which was asked about how can the mother's songs be made to be culturally appropriate? Do you have any thoughts about this?
I think it's about, what can I say? When we were at Guildford Nursery School, there was a practitioner whose husband worked in recycling. And, you know, the discussion around the inappropriateness of some of the nursery rhymes, how outdated they were, etc., etc. You know, things like Ring a Ring of Roses is kind of celebrating the plague, the Black Death. And what they did was they kind of put together some lyrics that had meaning, that had relevance, and they made up nursery rhymes for themselves. I'm sure even after this COVID episode, in fact, days after lockdown, I was sent rhymes about COVID, you know, COVID's not coming after me, COVID's not coming after me. If it comes after me, I shall say whatever, whatever. So I think we're making up rhymes and songs all the time. And there's nothing wrong with the historical nursery rhymes. But I think what's important is that we need to make sure that the rhymes and songs that we're singing to children have knowledge in them, have life experiences, and that we can expand. Yeah, we can expand on that. And, you know, also looking at various different cultural variations, rather than just sticking to what we know, or this is what's always happened, you know, kind of almost stepping outside of our comfort box. But I know for me, if I think back to my practice, I'd always sung what we'd sung. I didn't really think very much about it. And I think the mother songs is one of the most challenging elements. And I think it's challenging because it gives us so much about development, about symbolic representation, about the moral framework. And that moral framework becomes really, really important in terms of thinking about what it is that we're singing with our children. So for me, I want to give them something that's real, and then kind of offer something that's fancy or has a wonderful rhyme and rhythm. Both are important, but it's not just about one. It's about really kind of widening your repertoire of what you offer children. I think Tina Bruce would be more appropriate to answer this question than me.
I was just going to invite Tina to perhaps come in here and talk about family songs, as perhaps we ought to call them. Tina, would you be willing to unmute and talk a little bit?
Thank you for reminding me about the muting. Yes, I mean, what I found when, and I know, Sasha, you have done a huge amount of wonderful research on family songs, mother songs, people singing songs with babies in daycare. So there may well be things you want to add to this. But one of the things that I began, it really came home to me, you know, going back, looking again at what Froebel was saying, was how he realized that you know, the way we hold babies, cuddle babies, play with babies when we sing with them seems to be very, very important. And it's got so many layers to it. That's what I like about the way he thinks about it. So you've got, you know, babies start to use their hands very early on. And they begin to look at their hands, and the way the focusing and the tracking of movement to the end of their arms with their hands still on it. All of these things are going to be important later on when they start reading and writing. But it's this wonderful journey, and he seems to have tracked it so brilliantly. And it seems to work, you know, in ways which you can make work in any part of the world. So with the hands, sometimes the hands are, you know, to do with people, you know, so I mean a famous song would be Tommy Thumb, and all the characters in that song, so that your hands are becoming people. Sometimes your hands becoming something like two little birds sitting on a wall. I mean, I'm coming up with ones that you probably all know very well. Oh, my battery's running low. Let me plug in, and I'll do it. And so he's engaging with nature. He's engaging with people. He's taking children into representing things through symbols, and it's very sophisticated. And it makes you look at a song like "There's a worm at the bottom of my garden, and its name is Wiggly Woo." You start looking at it again and thinking, how much is that linking with what children really know about worms? Do they know enough about worms that I can play with the idea of worms and have a fantasy worm that's not such a real worm, that maybe is pink or something? But I'm not going to do that until I know they know about worms, and my finger is going to represent things. But I could go on forever. I will stop there, Sasha.
Thank you so much, Tina, and thank you for inviting me to say something. I think the only thing I would want to say, which of course links to Froebel's principles, is attention to what happens in children's families and communities in terms of songs and singing and their cultural specificity, I suppose. What is special about their own cultural traditions in terms of songs and singing, and what can families bring into the setting to enhance what already happens in terms of songs and singing, so that those family songs become family songs that are not only sit outside the setting but also belong within them. And certainly in some of the research that my colleague Kathy Gooch and I carried out, the settings that we worked with were very eager to find out, so what kinds of singing, what kinds of songs happen in children's lives beyond the walls of the setting, and how can those be linked together, those two worlds be linked together. So I think that was the only thing I really wanted to add, was how much do we know about what children might be singing elsewhere with their families, and the significance of those songs in terms of their family cultures and their community cultures as well. So hopefully that begins to link a little bit to the question that was asked about mother songs from a cultural perspective, because I'm talking about what Adrian Holiday calls small cultures, rather than the idea of culture across a whole country, for example, if such a thing even exists. So I didn't really want to say any more about that because I'm not the expert. We have the experts sitting on the panel. Amber and Carol, would you like to say anything about either the songs, the family songs, in your experiences, or indeed anything else relating to the Froebel short courses that might have had an effect on the ways in which you're working within your settings?
I think once you've done the Mother Song short course, you really do think about what you're singing a lot more and what you're putting into practice and how you sing with the children and what you're using. That's what I found within my practice.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Carol.
That's right. I would agree with that. And also I think a lovely addition that we've had recently to Development Matters is Nicola Burke's musical Development Matters, which helps practitioners to really think about what it is that they're presenting to the children, and what the value of each piece that they are choosing to do with the children. And again, the Froebelian principle really underpins all of that as well. So the two things can go nicely hand in hand there.
Marvellous, thank you.
And I would add that Nicola Burke is actually one of our trainee travelling tutors. So yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I've just seen a question pop up on the chat. Does the Froebel Trust have a Facebook page, or can recommend a group community that has? Sorry, I'm just going to just to say yes, we do have a Facebook page, and we also have a Twitter feed, and recommend a group or community that has great conversations. What a super question. There is a Froebel network which sits alongside the Froebel short courses and indeed the certificate courses and the master's courses, which are run at Edinburgh University and Roehampton University. And anyone who is taking part in the short courses, the certificate courses or the master's courses is invited to join Froebel networks, where the most wonderful conversations happen, generally in person during gatherings, local gatherings, but obviously at the moment the majority are happening like this, online through webinars, using technology such as WhatsApp. Stella, do you want to say anything about your WhatsApp groups and the kinds of conversations that you have with settings who have taken part or are taking part in the courses, and the sort of additional support that happens around conversations like those suggested?
Yes, we, you know, once we've delivered an element, which will be the 2 days, that's not the end of our relationship. We continue to have a relationship with the settings. So if I take a setting, for instance, like if I take Guildford, because Guildford Nursery School have now done 4 of the elements. We continue to work together, we deliver particular seminars. There could be, let's say for instance, there could be something that they're wanting to have unpicked around one of the elements, because Froebel is a really, really, really deep thinker. And you know, when I was talking earlier on about the inner life of the child, that concept, it's quite a deep concept. And I think once practitioners like Amber and Carol apply that to their practice, there are other conversations that are had. So what you find we have is, we tend to have, we'll have seminars, we'll have seminar discussion groups that will explore those issues and how they impact on our Froebelian practice. And there's a question that I think quite a lot of the settings that take part in the short courses start asking themselves. And that question is it Froebelian? And there's not a simple answer to that question. It might sound like a simple question, but actually it's much deeper than it seems. So there's constant support, there's constant mentoring, whether it's via email or telephone or directing via resources, or in some circumstances having a kitchen seminar with Professor Tina Bruce in her kitchen. Yeah, there's been a few groups that have been, yeah, we've just been able to kind of extend what we offer. Yes, because we did recently have a seminar, I think it was for Linden Tree, Tina, in your kitchen. Yes.
Yes, it was just before COVID.
Wonderful. Thank you so much
question.
for answering that question. I hope so too, but please keep your questions coming. We have just about 4 minutes left, so if there is anything else you wanted to ask, by all means do pop that in the Q&A, and I shall keep looking at that. There are, of course, also opportunities that the Froebel Trust organises separately. So as I mentioned, on the YouTube channel, there are all these videos of other webinars that have happened over the last few weeks and months. So taking part in these kinds of webinars is another opportunity for conversations to happen. And we will be continuing those throughout the next academic year. So when term starts in England in September, I realise it starts at different times in different places, but when it starts in England in September, our new seminar/webinar series will begin. We have a research and practice conference every 2 years, which will be happening next March, we hope. There is the Edinburgh Froebel Society network, I beg your pardon, Edinburgh Froebel network is teaming up with the International Froebel Society to run a fantastic international conference, which fingers crossed will be happening in Edinburgh next June. And so that's again another opportunity to network, find friends, ask questions, have challenging and fascinating conversations. The International Froebel Society has its own website, as does the Edinburgh Froebel Network, and indeed the Froebel Network, and we can share these links with you. If you'd like to join our mailing list, you just need to email office@froebeltrust.org.uk, and we can add you to our mailing list so that you will be hearing about all sorts of events that may happen over the next few weeks and months. I'm just checking the chat. And lots of people saying lots of great things about you, Stella, and about our other participants in the courses. So thank you for your comments. We're just about to run out of time. Could I ask you, if you wouldn't mind, if you would answer our poll, which I'm hoping will launch any second now, because we really want to know how you heard about us and what you think about this training. So, there it is. Thanks, Victoria. I think Victoria's just launched the poll. You should be able to click on this on your screen. And if you wouldn't mind answering, I think there's about 5 questions, that's all. It should only take you a few seconds. We'd be enormously grateful. It just gives us a sense of what we have been doing, what we could be doing better, and so on. Oh, goodness, that's magic. There we go. Everyone can see how people are answering this. Super. I want to thank Amber and Carol and Tina and Stella very, very much for their time, which they've given completely voluntarily today. So we really appreciate you joining us. I want to thank all of you. I imagine that for most people who are joining us today, it's holiday time. And so for you to join a webinar like this, we're enormously grateful. It's been fantastic having you with us. Thank you to Victoria for setting the webinar up and running it so expertly. If you do have any questions, please do email us. You had Victoria's email address there if you wanted to know about the short courses, but you can have a look on our website, and we will be in touch very soon to send you the links that you've been asking for, to the YouTube channel, the various slides and videos that you were asking about. And if you're interested in the pamphlets, please have a look on the website, froebel.org.uk/pamphlets. You'll find them there. We're about to publish a brand new one about Froebel's Gifts and Block Play, which by Jane Winnett, which will be absolutely wonderful, and more to come. So it's 12 o'clock on the dot, and with that I'm going to say goodbye and thank you all so much.